Good morning, good day. Welcome to the weekly ADM Agriculture YouTube video. My name is Freddie Humfrey, Head of Grain Trading here at ADM Ag in the UK. So quite a bumptious week, certainly when we look at the macros. As I'm sure many of you will have seen, the nearby conclusion of the US presidential election, Donald Trump and his team coming out with what is expected to be a positive outcome for them, certainly keeping the markets in a little bit of a question mode from a macro political aspect, both domestically in terms of agricultural games, but also from a political wider sphere around the world and the influence that the US has on that. Moving away from the political side and the plentiful questions that brings, I'm just going to look at some of the macros here today. I think there's some quite interesting aspects going on in the marketplace. We're obviously in that key seesaw period, that pivot period where we're moving away from old crop in Northern Hemisphere and starting to think about new crop plantings. We're also seeing that in Southern Hemisphere where we've got Australia just starting to dig into a pretty substantial Australian wheat crop. Meanwhile, in Brazil in particular, having had several weeks, if not months, of dry conditions and continuing challenges there from both a soil moisture perspective, but also a river level perspective, we now see some moisture coming into the forecast over last week, this week, and next, which is just allowing planting pace to move forward. I think we're just going to start off with a quick look at the US and just what it means in terms of the recent weather. Just got the US drought monitor up on the screen there for you. I think it's quite interesting as we can see that sort of main key grain belt through the US and through the Texas Panhandle up into the Midwest and up into the borders via the Great Lakes states. A lot of those states now in moderately drought conditions through to extreme drought conditions, so the beige through red areas. And even eastern states where we've seen some precipitation from the back end of recent hurricanes now moving into abnormally dry conditions. What that has allowed is the old crop, so the soybean and the corn harvest, have really progressed very, very aggressively. Fastest rates that we've seen for a decade plus on both of those commodities now, and that's really been pushing that harvest rate. When you combine that with what was forecast to be very good yields, particularly on the corn crop, that is putting a little bit of pressure on elevation in the nearby. Big crops coming in quickly and decent stocks from the back end of last year anyway, all just continuing to keep a little bit of pressure on, particularly from a corn perspective within the grains matrix. So whilst that's generally a positive and yields have held up well to the old crop, it does raise an amber flag for the new season. Obviously, the majority of US acres, when it comes to grain, are spring orientated in the form of corn and spring wheat. Corn, with winter wheat being a smaller aspect of the picture. We've got a long way to go, a lot of weather, but we all know that spring weather is absolutely crucial to how crops do. So having gone through fall and into early winter with what is a very dry outlook in the US, we need decent precipitation, whether that comes in the form of rain or snowfall across much of the key grain belts through the winter and into early spring, because at the moment we're going in with some fairly dry soil conditions, and that will put pressure on spring crops unless we get a decent weather window through winter into early spring, as I say. So just one to watch there, and then when you look at the breakdown of by area, you can see corn there. 81% of the corn regions are now in drought, according to the USDA. Soybeans not far behind at 73%, both of those up 5% week on week. So just goes to compound. Yeah, very beneficial for the harvest progress. That's kept a little bit of pressure on elevation and harvest pressure, so to speak, but one to watch for as we move through the winter. It's not actually a dissimilar window when we think about Russia. Russia's had a fairly extended period of dryness now, albeit some precipitation in the recent weeks has helped things, but some concerns going forward about winter crops having gone into the ground and also germinating in relatively dry conditions. That puts additional stress on them as we move through winter into spring. Obviously, we've got the ever-present concern of frost kill later on in the period, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on. So I think it's a window here where we're in a weather market. We've coming off the back of significant stocks around the world for the grains matrix and been building generically for the last couple of seasons, and now we see some areas where weather could potentially be a challenge. It's not there today to influence crops too heavily for next season, but we've got to always think about the potential of these crops. Just moving to the UK very quickly and to summarise that piece. UK wheat planting's actually gone on better than had been expected, particularly when we consider September and early October precipitation events, especially in the central south of the country. And we now see a decent wheat crop in the ground and also going in the ground even in this slightly later than normal date in the early parts of November. So the potential for a decent crop next year, that puts pressure on the requirement to continue to import replacement products like German A wheat to replace Group 1s or corn to replace feed wheat in the animal feed diets. So just want to think about next year, if we have a big crop as we go through winter into spring for 25-26, do we need to continue to import? Do we need to offset some of those big stocks that we're potentially building through those imports this year, particularly when we consider that there is an inverse in price into next season? Obviously, the UK will follow the macro market and the global aspects of price direction, but want to keep an eye on your radar when we're thinking about the influence of next crop year's push, particularly in the back end of this season, April, May, June, for the current cropping market. So want to keep a close eye on as wheat continues to go into the ground. Challenges from a weather perspective overall, but probably 3 or 4 months away before they really start to have any influence, and so plenty of weather to potentially offset that in the meantime. Weather markets this time of the year are always very difficult, so expect some chop through the next couple of months. Hopefully that's interesting, and if you've got any questions, as always, reach out to us at ADM Agriculture. We're always willing to field questions and criticisms. Thanks very much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.